I'm Alan Wardis, and you're listening to Think Radio.
So, 25% of the people in the U.S. will say that they don't have a person to turn to when they're suffering or in pain. So they're alone.
Wait a minute. 1 in 4?
1 in 4 say that they don't have anybody to go to. So what do you do in those situations?
That's Anthony Poponi, deep-thinking comedian, MC, and event host. He's got a plan to change the world one genuine human connection at a time. To find out how, stay tuned for this episode of Think Radio.
Think Radio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison's locally owned hometown newspaper, and by the Western State Colorado University Master of Environmental Management Forum, working to connect students, the community, and the environment. Think Radio is also supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can become a Think Radio patron, visit alanwardismedia.com. That's ALANWARTES media.com.
Anthony, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in a lot of things about what you do because you do a lot of things, right? You're one of those guys that seems to pop up everywhere.
That's good, right?
In the best possible.
Okay, good.
In the best possible sense. Yeah, you're one of those guys that is just everywhere doing a little bit of everything, and that is a very good thing.
Makes me happy.
Yeah. But the thing that we don't readily see when we see you out emceeing an event or moderating a discussion somehow, we don't ever get to see your story. We don't ever get to know who you are. How did you come, not just to be here, but how did you come to be you? Tell me your story.
Well, as in many other cases, I was offered a one-way flight to a community with no return trip. I'm kidding. That's not how I wound up here. My ex-wife and I came out here to buy a business. We lived in Florida at the time, and we came up here in August. And if you know what Florida is like in August and what this place is like in August, it was very, very, very attractive.
Might be just a little bit appealing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And so we had the intent of looking at 3 different places. And after coming here and looking at the business opportunity here and the community itself, we just never even went to the other places. And the other places were fun places, South Lake Tahoe and Lahaina and Hawaii. And this place just grabbed us.
Well, so why? I mean, obviously the weather, you've already mentioned.
Yeah.
The fact that we have single-digit humidity here on some days, and
nice.
Florida has, I don't know, triple digits.
Yeah, that's as many digits as it takes to make it absolutely miserable.
Right. But other than that, what were you looking for? What was it about this place that jumped up and said, pick me?
Community. We came from an interesting place in Florida, and I'm not from there, and but lived there for 7 years, and very much attracted to places that have sort of a sense of place. And so I remember distinctly standing probably in the middle of the road on 135. So it's surprising that I wasn't killed, but in August. But looking, standing there and looking up 135 and seeing Carbon Peak and Flat Top and Red Mountain, and just being blown away by the beauty of this place. And I've always had an affinity for the outdoors and being, close to nature. But being on those first 2 blocks of Main Street, I mean, that's like the lifeblood of Gunnison. And Elk Avenue, I would think you can say that is the same thing for the north end of the valley. And so it felt like a place that just resonated as far as values, interests, space, gathering space.
Well, so that sort of answers the question of how you came to be here. You were specifically looking for a new home.
Yeah.
But how did you come to be you? Looking for a new home.
If you ask people on the street, they'd give you a variety of interesting responses to that. It's been an interesting career. I've done everything from being a scientist to being a researcher to being a middle school science teacher to being a conservation biologist. And when I worked here, working in the Coal Creek realm and doing work with that nonprofit, it's been really interesting to just do things and recognize that they served you at a time and you enjoy doing those things. And this latest evolution of me being, on a microphone a lot and behind a microphone and in front of people, I think is sort of recognition of what really lights me up.
Did you do a lot of that as a kid, as a teenager? I mean, were you the class clown? in high
Yes,
school?
definitely class clown. Desire to be center of attention for sure. And
That comes as no surprise to anyone.
thank you.
It was a question that I had to ask, but we already knew the answer.
I've never shied away from public speaking, even though it's now turned into more of a formality in my professional career. But before, it was something that, what I was doing, work with sea turtles, I was not great at the science part of it. I was great at talking to the people about the science part of it, and I wasn't afraid of that. And some scientists, like engineers and accountants, those sort of personality types hate that. It terrifies them. I always loved it. I feel like that was the right role for me in an organization. So I think lately I've just recognized that why am I not doing that more as a career path if it's something that makes me so happy and it's something that I think I am above mediocre at doing.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun to explore that,
Well, at what point did you cross that threshold where you said, wait a minute, this could be more than just what I do as a hobby or on the sidelines? Was there a moment that provided the clarity you needed to step out?
Probably a couple different points popped to mind. One was doing a silent or a live auction for the Gunnison Valley Animal Welfare League probably a decade ago. And Christy Hoppert, who no longer lives here but is an amazingly funny woman, she and I are old neighbors. They asked us to co-MC and auctioneer this live auction. And we did it really well together. But at one point, Christy just looked over and said, why don't you just keep doing this? And I'll go over here, and because I was in flow state, and I was in the zone. I just loved doing it.
Upstaging Christy.
No, that's not what made me happy. Sorry, Christy. And then another point, I just remember doing a wedding, emceeing some friends' weddings when I lived in Hawaii, and feeling super tired, getting ready to hop on stage. The wedding was the Saturday after, I think, a Thursday or a Friday night, St. Patty's Day. And so we have all these wedding things that we're doing, and then St. Patty's Day, and then show up to the wedding venue, and I'm getting ready to hop on stage, and I was like, holy cow, I've got nothing right now. And as soon as I walked out on stage, just there it was.
Well, you've already said it, the flow state.
Yeah, man.
A lot of artists recognize that,
Yeah.
athletes for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. The zone,
Yeah.
Same. So I think that those were just, maybe the first time was like, oh, you should, this Animal Welfare League thing was, you should explore this more. It's something that you enjoy doing. And then sort of affirmation a few years later of just like, you've gotten better at this. You can work with crowds. You should keep pursuing this.
Yeah, you describe yourself as a certified heckler.
It's a self-certification.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to ask, what was the governing body that... And I'm assuming that being an accredited jester
Yes.
is in the same...
Also
same realm.
self-certification, yes.
Well, although, listen, I'm going to go ahead and say I think your audiences certify and accredit you as well, because you really do have a great rapport.
Thanks.
With people in an audience. I saw it the first time I ever saw you do anything. It was kind of a tough crowd, I think. We were outside at the Arts Center doing a dinner, and not tough because people weren't enjoying themselves, but it was outside, and nobody really knew what was going on. But you really held us in the palm of your hand, and I just want to compliment you for that.
Thanks.
In fact, it brings up a question for me.
Sure.
I mean, I could see you doing stand-up on the circuit, right? Comedy club stuff. Has that sort of application for your talents ever crossed your mind?
Yes. I certainly try to weave humor into everything I do, and that's even sort of the tagline for the business. The business is called Humor Us, and it says, but we're way more than just humorous. And I think there's a part of me with this really long history of working with nonprofits that I'm always looking for something more than just the quick laugh. I want it to be something that's, for stand-up to me, some reason it feels shallow, and I know it's not. I know that it serves a greater purpose. There's such power in making people laugh and how that can change an individual. But I think that's why I attach myself to more of the keynote, so that there's information being provided and transformation being provided through the information, along with it being humorous. So I've thought about the stand-up piece, and I'll keep playing with it. I'm doing improv right now, and improv is just so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. The stand-up piece, I think that if you look at, you do the Strengths Finder program. Have you ever done that with Gallup and figure out your strengths? And one of the things that jumps out really quickly there is that staleness or repetition are not for me. And that's my big fear with doing stand-up, is just doing the same pitch over and over. I think I won't be coming from a place of like coming from the heart if I'm not, to a degree, impromptu. I prepare for what I do, but there's also so much of what comes out of me on stage that
you're listening to it at the same time that the audience is.
Like I'm just, people come up after and be like, "That was so funny," and you're like, when did I say that? Like that's so fun.
So it wouldn't have to be a 9 to 5 to not appeal to you. Even something like stand-up is a little too rigid.
Yeah. Well, it's too rigid, I think, because of maybe it's a mindset of scarcity right now, of just not feeling like I have the time to dedicate to create content, new content.
Right.
Somebody like Robin Williams, I've heard Bill Maher comes to Hawaii every year, and I was listening to his podcast, and then he comes to Hawaii to do his stand-up. It's his HBO show, and he's reading it off of like a little easel where he's flipping pages and reading jokes, and I can't imagine that is enjoyable for him.
Right.
Maybe creating the content is the fun part there and the repetition doesn't bother him, versus somebody like Robin Williams, that they would say that 2 weeks into his show on tour, he wouldn't even be doing the same jokes that he was doing before. I mean, he was just a prolific creator of content. And so I think mine is weaving in humor with what I do in other realms. So.
Well, and let's talk about that. Let's make
sure.
that shift to these other realms. You've mentioned it. You do a lot of work for nonprofits.
Yep.
Why? What is it about nonprofit organizations and the work they do that appeals to you so much?
It comes from a place of, I think, gratitude for kind of where I am in my life. I come from a broken family. My parents divorced when I was 5. And when they divorced, my mom left my father with, she tells this story, and I love this story. I'm so proud of my mom. She left with 3 kids, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And she left with 3 quarters, that's 1 quarter for each child, and a can of Campbell's soup. And she lifted herself up. She got a Pell Grant. She went to college, got her nursing degree, and she's been tax-paying, providing citizen. She works in hospice now. She's just retiring. And I just recognized that we were given a chance because of the social safety net that our nation provides and call it community. And I think I was just driven to give back. And so I gave back for a long time in the environmental realm. I was doing a lot of work with sea turtles and then transitioning into more research, and then here doing more watershed related work. And then in Hawaii, the big shift that came for me that I think has also kind of changed my relationship with nonprofits in a really good way for me is I worked for Boys and Girls Club, and impoverished youth needing a helping hand, needing to be lifted up. And that connected me to my childhood very closely. So that was a very powerful mission for me that, but also changed my relationship with thinking of myself as only a scientist, and then moving into this realm of working with impoverished demographic. But then also realizing that nonprofit realm can hold you back too, that because you work in nonprofits, just because they hire you as the fundraiser or they hired you to do marketing, doesn't mean that you don't help take out the trash, and doesn't mean that you don't clean up after the event, even though you're supposed to be the high level fundraiser. And there's no problem with having humility and doing those roles.
Of course.
But that steps away from, here, we'll say it again, flow, like what is it that really lights me up and how do you do more of that?
Mm-hmm. And it's okay to ask yourself that question and to pursue it.
It's been a very powerful and very rewarding question.
Yeah.
So now I'm supporting the nonprofit community more of like, or supporting my community, let's call it overall, and the vibrancy of our community, our valley, by being the MC at iBar and doing something with the Chamber of Commerce to help with their events, and doing things, doing galas and helping with those sort of elements, live auctions that are a great use of what I think is my skill set and matching a need with the community.
Sure. It focuses your talent on exactly where it's needed.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the trend these days on the subject of nonprofits and volunteerism nationwide? The trend of a precipitous decline in volunteerism, that nonprofits and organizations of all kinds, even volunteer fire departments, having such a difficult time finding people willing to step up and participate, contribute. What's going on there in your mind?
there's a grand disconnect, I think, of face to face. Like here we are sitting face to face, and the human brain loves it. We get oxytocin releases. It's something that we're wired to do. Humans are very social creatures, and so that this is happening, and it's not the first time it's happened in our modern era, is certainly problematic. I think it's leading to a lot of declines in society overall. The book Better Together and Bowling Alone, they're by Robert Putnam and Louis Fieldstein. They were here on campus probably about a decade ago, brought in by the Community Foundation, and showed this precipitous decline. And it's not just nonprofits. It was all sorts of organizations. It was faith-based institutions as well.
Mm-hmm. Church memberships way down.
Everything. And it was also a change in generosity, a change in amount of money going out to nonprofits. And also a decline in things like picnics and parties, supper clubs, and all of it moving in that direction. And if the book itself talks about, comes from Better Together, it talks about how this started in the 1960s. It started when we started having dual income families, and that the homemaker typically was the one that was the civic engagee. That was the person that had the time to care for the kids, take care of the family.
But also run the bake sales and
do the PTA stuff.
Organize those things.
And that changes when somebody, now is investing that time in work. And so that's part of it. And that's not the first time it happened in the 1960s. It also was at the same time as the advent of the blue screen TV, right? So people were more in their own homes watching this TV screen versus connecting with others, being part of society. And the book actually talks a lot about how this happened in the Industrial Revolution as well, that this was something that came around when new gadgets were mass available, there was more money flowing, people were invested in material pieces, and they started to disconnect as a society. So this is turned in the 1900s. And they took an active approach to resolve it, to fix it. And this is where the creation of so many historic sort of nonprofits came from. Rotary Club, Boys and Girls Club, Red Cross, League of Women Voters all happened at this time because they were recognizing that they were disconnecting as a society. And the fix wasn't, this is because they were coming from farms, moving to cities, working in factories, and losing small community and turning into big community. And so their fix for that was to create smaller communities within communities through the nonprofit realm. And so there's solutions to this.
So all of that really leads into something that you are very passionate about, and really the reason why I wanted to talk with you today. In your business and in all of the work that you do around the community, you've identified this issue of social disconnection as something that is very powerfully important to you. What was it about that particular trend in society that caught your attention and has actually enticed you to form part of your business around it?
Well, I think part of it is that the evidence out there that this is a problem has made me just aware of it, is starting with my own exploration of happiness, and that started for me a lot was, well, what's the power of laughter? Why does laughter make people so happy? Oh, it releases endorphins. And that's a happy chemical that your brain releases. And then it transitioned into, well, there's other happy chemicals. There's serotonin when you feel pride or status, and there's dopamine when you accomplish tasks, and there's oxytocin. Oxytocin is, you get it from a high five, you get it from a hug, you get it from a kiss, you get it from being in love. You have a huge release of it when you give birth.
It's the relationship drug.
It's a relationship drug, right? And, again, we're driven by that as mammals. It's a survival tool that helped us. That's why we have clans and tribes, and even gazelles have herds. And knowing that that's so important to us, and then seeing that as a society we're disconnecting, we're super mobile now. We don't live in the hometowns. Like, this isn't your hometown, right?
No.
It's not my hometown. It's not even close to my hometown. I haven't lived in my hometown since 1990.
I've had about 5 in my lifetime, so.
And I keep moving because the law keeps catching up with me.
I promise not to tell them.
Yeah, thanks. This isn't my real name.
Okay.
I mean, who would choose Tony Poponi as a real name?
No one.
Nobody, right? So it's obviously a gimmick. But I think what made me so aware of the power of that connectedness and community is when I moved here. When I moved to Gunnison in 2006, I was always involved in volunteerism. I was always involved in my community, but I became a foster parent here. I was on boards, nonprofit boards. I was volunteering for events. I ran the River Festival for a while. And I had never been I don't think so heavily invested in something, in Gunnison, in this place, in this valley. And I always feel fortunate that I was working for Coal Creek up in Crested Butte, so I always sort of had a connection to the whole valley, and I've always loved that, but I've just recognized that this slipping away of this connectivity, that we have social media now, and we have smartphones, and we have video games, and we have 24-hour anything TV that you need in YouTube, that we're pulling away from each other, and it's not good for us.
And you find that's true even here, because this valley, this community is probably better off than a lot of places. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that when you look at what we have here in the environment to make us happy, and I don't mean the environment like the Forest
trees
Service,
and the mountains.
I mean our environment as a whole, taking people, place, opportunities. It just keeps coming to the forefront if you look at all these different bits of information on happiness. The most recent thing that I've been into and really loving is Blue Zones of Happiness, which is work by Dan Buettner, who initially looked at the longevity of populations and tried to reverse engineer why are they living so long in Costa Rica in this one community. Mm-hmm. And it's not because they're trying to. It's because they do things because of their environment that allows them to live so long. And then he did the same thing with happiness. They looked at communities throughout the world. Why are they so happy in Denmark? Why are they so happy in Boulder? Boulder's top 10 in the world.
I'm not happy when I'm in Boulder driving in the traffic. Well, what's their secret?
To each their own.
Yeah.
And I think to each their own is actually part of it. You have to find the environment that supports what you want. You know, if you need stadium rock concerts, or you need to go to big baseball games like the Rockies, Gunnison may not be the fit for you, right?
Right, unless you like driving a lot.
If you don't like winter, and you don't like skiing, there's probably elements, or hunting, something that gets you out of doors that you appreciate that, then this might not be the right environment. But Dan Buettner will say that 20% of your happiness is you control it, but that 80% of it is driven by where you are. And so where you are is like you find the right church, or you find the right nonprofit to volunteer for, you find the right venue to hang out with, you have good social connections, your friend network is really strong. Walkability is a huge piece of it. So if you live in either of our bigger communities in the valley, people on bikes and on foot all the time, it's really good for you. And he calls it natural movement. He's not saying that you need to run a marathon to be happy, because I would not be happy running a marathon.
But you need to be able to walk to the grocery store.
Yeah, but that is really good for you. That getting out, getting some endorphin release, stimulation, sunshine, all that stuff is really good for your overall happiness. So anyway, I think that, when you look at what makes this environment work, it's also that I get to play a role in this community that is part of, he calls it the 3 Ps: pleasure, pride, and purpose. I derive pleasure from a lot of the work that I do. I take pride in that work. I feel good about my life and the role I'm playing in my community. And purpose, I feel like I'm doing something of value with my time, either at work or in play.
Well, what are the consequences for communities when people don't have those things? For whatever reason, either the community design does not allow for walkability, or a number of factors that you could point to, that people find it especially hard to connect with each other and can't find connection to the 3 Ps that you just laid out. What are the consequences that communities face?
That's a big question. I mean, and you can take it as far as you want. I mean, I think on the extremes, we look at, it creates isolation. It creates isolation in the form of, 25% of the people in the U.S. will say that they don't have a person to turn to when they're suffering or in pain. So they're alone.
Wait a minute. 1 in 4?
1 in 4 say that they don't have anybody to go to. So what do you do in those situations? Does it lead to depression? Does it lead to drug abuse? Does it lead to substance abuse or alcohol, whatever it would be? That isolationism, right? And even that isolation where I think we do a great job in this community, where I would say that we would call it, I've heard Gunnison called sort of a purple state. It's a mixture of blue and red. Mm-hmm. And
you're speaking of a political spectrum,
yeah.
Right?
But that's a great thing, that we have the ability to rub elbows with real people with different opinions about politics. But I think because we know them as an individual, that's the guy that was the baseball coach. That's the guy that's the hockey coach. That's the person that I saw in Son of a Gun. That's the person that was in Move the Butte. That guy's a ski patroller. That I think it breaks down those barriers. There's not anonymity. Those are actual real people with real faces and real stories. And I think we have the ability to treat them with more compassion, or a willingness to not treat them as me or not me.
ThinkRadio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison, Colorado's locally owned hometown newspaper. ThinkRadio is also supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can join the ThinkRadio community of patrons, visit alanwartismedia.com. That's ALANWARTES media.com.
Well, one of the definitions of community that I've heard, and I wish I could attribute it, but I can't at this moment, is a community is a place where you know each other in more than one role.
Oh, I like that.
So, in other words, I know you because you work at Ace Hardware, but I also go to church with you, or I also...
seen you play in a band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coach kids soccer next to you. That's where community really begins. That seems to be what you're pointing to.
Yeah. And that community, and I think what we have that's offered here that jumped out at me lately about how excited I was to just see some of the things that we can offer in a valley of only 16,000 people. Move the Butte, that I've been to several times. But it's so amazing to see people on stage that you know from completely other roles.
Right. Dancing.
Given a chance to perform it. Like,
yeah.
That is just, and I can't wait to see those people next time. Because it was such an
awesome.
Yeah, just like, that was amazing, you know?
Yeah. And dancing of all things.
Yeah.
I mean, most people wouldn't dance in public to save their lives. If they really thought people were watching, no, they wouldn't do it.
I dance in public, but people usually pay me to stop. And I only
Is that how you make your money?
Not much money. I do. The only thing I know how to do is that dance that the gopher does from Caddyshack. You know, it's just back and forth with a little white man over.
Yeah, white guy dance for sure.
Yeah.
But your point is that's real community.
Yeah.
But my question to you was, you're seeing these creeping negative consequences of disconnection even here. How? Where? And how does it manifest in your mind?
Well, I don't know. Walk around your community at night and watch how many blue screens are flickering, you know, inside. And
versus number of people walking.
Yeah, you know, and the Blue Zones piece will tell you that the happiest people on the planet only watch an hour of TV a day. And ask any nonprofit around here if they're having a hard time or an easy time recruiting board members. That's probably been a problem for a long, long time. Whereas I think it is potentially problematic here. I mean, we have suicides that are happening in our community, an alarming percentage, even with a small data set. We have drug use here. You know, we've seen a decline. I think it was reported recently in the paper about that dropping down, which is great. But I'm sure it's there. The problem is a lot of the times it's hidden, right? Like we don't see these issues manifest of depression if it's in isolation, and drug abuse, which is maybe done in isolation as well. I would say that our story is a positive one, you know, that I feel like what makes people come here and want to stay here, or then they leave here and they want to come back, is because of what they found here. You know, I think we're too small to be included in maybe an analysis of this happiness metric, but I think what made me feel so strongly about this place was the factors that exist that allow us to connect with others and the environment that fosters happiness.
So if you're talking to a room full of executive directors of nonprofit organizations, you're not going to get any arguments on anything that you've said so far. These people know, they come at the problem from different angles.
Sure.
And in different specialties, but they know what you're talking about. They know how difficult it is to get people to engage and to even reach out with help. But if you're talking to a room full of average folks, you know, the just work-a-day people, what do you say to them to impress upon them that this matters? Why does it matter to the average person? Whether we watch too much TV or not, whether we have picnics anymore or not, what's at stake for us?
That's a tough one. You know, I mean, the overall health of the community and the health of the individuals in that community. I mean, I think we all play a role in our own happiness, of course, and then the happiness of our community, or this life satisfaction, you know, is maybe a different definition of happiness. And I think it also plays a role, and you mix it in with all the other factors that make life challenging here. Granted, it's -22 sometimes.
That's a challenge.
That'll chase people away if it doesn't kill them. And then it's also, you look at the other challenges of affordable housing and the challenges of living wages. Our median household income is really low, and so people move here, they would like to stay here, but what they give up on a lot of time is that pleasure piece. They want to be here, and so they have to choose either or. I can either have my career path in a bigger city, or I can have the lifestyle that I want. But I can't have the lifestyle I want living in Denver, but I can have the lifestyle here, but I have to eat ramen noodles.
Yeah, or work 4 jobs, and then they don't even have time to go to the picnic if it is happening. So
that's a huge loss to social capital too, and that's the term that Robert Putnam came up with, is that we lose a lot when people leave this community, because if they had roots here and they had the time here and they weren't working 4 jobs, they're volunteering for the fire department. They're on the board for a nonprofit. They're a baseball coach. They're acting in a play. They're engaged in the vibrancy of this community. But we don't get that when they come and they go. One of the things that always puts me at dis-ease a little bit is a couple moves here. Husband and wife moves out here. And they move out here because the wife got a job at Western. And I'm like, well, what's your husband going to do? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, we don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I was like, that is a ticking clock for them to leave this community. Right? In most cases, and not most cases, I don't have any data to support that, but if they're both looking for their career and that's an important piece for them, that being a barista is a great temporary fix for them, but that's not what they want to be doing with their lives. So eventually they look for the next opportunity.
But your premise seems to be that focusing on creating better social cohesion and connection actually helps with these things. How do you see that?
Well, I think it breaks down barriers too. I mean, put yourself in a room full of strangers. There's a huge amount of discomfort that can come from that, unless, of course, you like holding the microphone and telling mediocre jokes.
Not everyone can do that.
And not everyone should, and some people say I shouldn't. But yeah, I think that it creates vibrancy. It fulfills a lot of needs for the human brain. That I think overall are helpful for us and get us to cross those divides, to quit treating ourselves as left or right or this or that.
Well, and do you think it would help break down some of what you described as kind of invisibility, that these problems are there, we just don't see them? That if we're interacting with each other more, we're more likely to catch on that somebody's struggling.
Well, yeah, and if we're paying attention, we've seen this decline in trust over time too. And that decline in trust has come from competitive environments and this lack of empathy towards other people, or an ability to be vulnerable, to share a story about my own childhood poverty. That's not something I was proud of. It was something I carried shame over. And I had to realize, unless you believe in a very like my soul sent me to that place of being born into poverty,
right?
That's what my soul needed. Fine. I don't know that I necessarily fall into that, but for the longest time, I was a child that was born into that, and through no decision of my own, I was in that role. But why should I feel shame about that? And so
great question.
So why don't we? But we have a hard time showing vulnerability, because people can use that against us. We have competitive work environments, and so
we don't want to look stupid, or flawed,
right? And that's what people ask me during job interviews, and maybe that's why I'm self-employed. Is what's one of your biggest strengths? I love to say, I make mistakes all the time, and I'm willing to be wrong. And I think the hardest thing is to walk into a situation and say, this is my position. And then you're fed a lot of different information, have really rigorous dialogue. And I love having that dialogue. And then at the end being like, I was wrong. And I am so grateful for this, and I guess call it enlightenment around subject A that helps me grow as a person. But you can choose not to do that and choose not to grow as a person. Unfortunately, a lot of the ways I've been growing lately is outward. Until,
as he says, as he pats his midsection.
My midsection. Yeah. The joke I always use is it's winter weight from 2006. But yeah, I think that when we get out and we do those things, it breaks that isolation. And so what people have to be willing to do is to step away from the comfort of electronic devices and the comfort of our own home. And we have to say hi to our neighbor. We have to know who our neighbor is. And the person in the cubicle next to us, we should know not just their name, but do you have dogs? do you have kids? Is there a husband?
Mhm.
Where are you from? I think there's this loss of reliance, and we used to raise barns together, right? We would come together as a community to do that. Industrial Revolution, we don't need to raise barns anymore. They come delivered on the back of a lowboy and dropped in our house, and we just plug them in.
And furthermore, everyone's got one, so we don't need to share them anymore.
Yeah, right. So there's no communal sort of belief anymore. We're not going to prevent somebody from severe depression if that's a chemical flaw within them that needs to be chemically treated. But we can keep people from heading down these downward spirals because they're out and doing things and helping find their own passion.
Okay, so how? I mean, and I'm talking about practical, specific things. How would you prescribe, Dr. Tony Poponi?
Doctor of love.
Doctor of love. Oh, I don't want to go there.
No, it's
at all.
Russian, of love.
Got it. Okay. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
You're writing the prescription for a community that is suffering from social discontinuity. Well, what are the things that can be done? And let me refine the question even further, because I think communities are trying to do lots of things.
Sure.
Let's talk to individual people. What can individual people do to contribute to the solution?
For their own solution or for the community? Both.
Well, let's start with themselves.
Sure. I think you have to find what works for you. And I think you have to look at what lights you up and chase that. Spend time understanding who you are and spend time on finding out what makes you happy and find ways to bring that into your life more.
And if I say to you, it makes me happy to play video games 20 hours a day.
I would not disagree that that is possible for some people. Not everybody's social, right? There are these things called introverts, and I have this great T-shirt that says "Introverts unite, alone in your own homes," and
Yeah.
and so that's not for everybody. But so find what works for you, and engage in it more. And for some people, the Xbox might actually make them happy because it's something that they like to do. It's a mental break. It's whatever it is for them. It gets them away. There's a point where that's diminishing returns. I would say the same thing for going out for happy hour. Happy hour is good. It's social.
Right up to the point that it gets a little too happy.
Yeah, and then there's diminishing returns for happy hour too. If your happy hour continues until 2 a.m., that's not happy hour. That's probably a suffering the next day. So I think on the personal level, figuring out what makes you tick, and then embracing the discomfort that comes with making the changes that you would like in your life. And knowing that it doesn't happen overnight. And
what kind of discomfort are you referring to that people would have to face and break down?
It's very personal.
So it could just be discomfort in a crowd.
Yeah. I'm not into organized religion. That's not my thing, but we keep coming back to faith-based because it comes out of that Blue Zones book that people that are actively engaged in their spirituality are happier. So the challenge for you might be finding that right version of spirituality. And what Dan Buettner will say is go to 6 churches or go to 6 organized facilities, a mosque, whatever it is for you. See if it works. If it works, stay. If it doesn't, keep going. But you have to invest in trying to find that. For me, there's discomfort in a lot of things. I love improv, but going to improv for the first time, there's no script. That's the point, So there's stepping into that situation and hopefully being surrounded by supportive people that want to see you succeed in that. And so if it's playing music or if it's playing sports, I think that's we have such a great hockey community here, from kids all the way up to adults, that we have just such a great environment to learn to play hockey. And I've seen so many people come through, as we call them, never evers, that we have good coaches that take care of these people, recognize the struggles, and when they're on your hockey team, by and large, we're kind to them. Maybe not in the playoffs as much, but you have to be willing to take that step. And so there's discomfort in that step.
Well, so that brings me back to my point,
Okay.
That communities really are doing a lot of the right things.
Oh, yeah.
There is a hockey team. There is a Gunnison Arts Center.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations that would cater to a lot of these needs, these niches that you're referring to and identifying. But you have to turn off the TV and go.
Yeah, you've got to make that decision. And I would say that this is the other thing we can do as individuals to support community, to support individuals. If you see how that works full circle, is that the Chamber of Commerce up in Crested Butte has for years now taken an active role in building events for the community. You know, they put on the Fat Bike Worlds, they put on the Chainless Race, they put on Cheerleading Beer Fest and Crafted. And the Chamber of Commerce down here has done that as well. They've done things that I would call community events versus special events. You know, community events, money losers, right? So Night of Lights, great thing to get people together to celebrate and out. Who takes that on? Who's going to be the glue in the community to make things happen like that? Chamber puts on the Trick or Treat on Main Street, you know, and so getting people out again, getting our kids out in the community and getting them connected to downtown.
Wait, that's for kids? I do that every year.
I liked your outfit last year. R2-D2, nobody knew that was you in there.
But much taller than you thought.
But yeah, I think we have to, we as a community have to support those efforts. And it can be however you want. Be a member of the chamber, perform in the Arts Center. You know, I don't think they ever have too many actors for Son of a Gun from my past experience, you know. But be a writer for Son of a Gun. Find what works for you that fulfills you. I think that's the biggest part of this for me, is that there are infinite needs and infinite connections to people that can fulfill that need, and both can win. You know, that one of the worst volunteer roles I've ever had in my life was being on the governance committee for the Community Foundation. Now, I love the Community Foundation. You know, I have a very strong connection to them. But me reviewing plans and policies, that is not why I was put on this planet, you know?
Right.
And so it was service to community, but what did it do back for me? And I don't think there's any reason to be selfish. And so instead, what's a better role for me for the Community Foundation? Well, every year they bring Asleep at the Wheel out to Ibar Ranch. And so I can MC that and help craft content and carry it out on the mic. I win. I'm enjoying myself. Community Foundation wins. There's probably some eye rolls in the audience at some of my jokes, but that's okay.
Well, you've learned to live with that, I'm sure.
I've had to.
Yeah. No, I can see on your face that it's deeply painful at times.
The public speaking, yes, of course.
Well, so this brings us full circle then to what it is that you have to offer. We've defined the problem. The problem is that we're disintegrating in some ways.
Yeah.
A lot of our community functions are not functioning all that well.
Yeah, and let's pause there for a sec, because I think we're talking a lot of doom and gloom, and when I think we have really solid communities, but we have to be actively managing to not let those things fall apart.
Right, and part of what we said is we can.
Yes, we
There
can.
is a solution. There is a cure.
We're doing it, and I think there's opportunities to continue to do more.
Well, which brings me to my next
so
question.
where are we going with this? Yeah.
How can you help? You formed a company, Humor Us. Tell us the website, please.
www.humore.us.
Humor Us.
Yes, or AnthonyPoponi.com, since I'm a narcissist.
Yeah. What are you offering? How can you help? How are you helping?
I mean, I play different roles in the community, and it's sort of by choice, right? So let's go back to the nonprofit example of working for a nonprofit, and you're the executive director, and you do everything from taking out the trash to writing the strategic plan. If taking out the trash is your skill set and you're really good at that and you find passion in that, do more of that. But if you want to be the executive director doing the executive functions, find ways to do more of that. So I've tried to carve out a role for me in this community and in the larger community, you know, our nation, of using what I enjoy doing. You know, my new marketing strategy is to quit telling people all the things I do and just say, hand me a microphone and let's go. You know, because that's what I enjoy doing, you know. And so I'm trying to find those roles where I'm either communicating, you know, public speaking or public relations or communications or marketing and communicating messages out. So that's part of the role I'm doing. And so I'm doing that with, you know, I work for the RTA. I do some work for them and love what that does for our economy and our community. Part of the ICE Lab, and helped with the accelerator cohort that came through and helped them with communication and public speaking, because I had to give a trout tank pitch at the end. And working, you know, as a volunteer with the Gunnison Vibrancy Initiative, because we've talked, you know, so much about these blue zones and place and environment, you know, that walkable streets and active with special events and active functionality that people want to gather there and get together, you know. So I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find those roles in the community that serve my vision for the community and also fit with the skill set that I would like to employ.
And you also offer classes, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And so if an organization wants to bring you in to hear this in a more concentrated version, you'll do that for them.
Yeah, there's a talk. It's on my website, just the humorous./happy. And there's one on rapport too, because I think rapport and effective communication, you were asking it before about what we can do as individuals. And I think part of that is to be willing to reach your hand out, say hi to someone, shake their hand, ask them how they're doing, mean it when you ask it. And when they ask you back, tell them something real. That be like, we've lost this ability to be interested in other people and to also be interesting ourselves. The thing that shuts me down the most when I'm talking to somebody is complaining about whatever it is, like complaining about the weather, or complaining about the, and like being on a ski lift and like people are, oh yeah, haven't had a powder. Hey man, you're on a ski lift. If this is,
think of all the alternative places you could be.
We need to really just savor the moments that we're in and recognize how lucky we are to be taking a breath in and taking a breath out.
Well, the other side of that coin, I think, is to be in a conversation and all you get out of someone is, fine, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's good.
And the trick there is that they may really want to tell you more.
Yeah. Well, so the last question I had intended to ask you today was, give us some homework. And I think that maybe you just did. You may have answered that question before I asked it. In other words, make it your mission to do what you just described.
I think that's a great thing.
Meet somebody.
Or some simple, really simple things. And this isn't meant to be shameless plug for my website, but I have an A to Z of happiness on there that takes each letter of the alphabet and assigns something to it about happiness. It's 26 lessons and 26 quotes from experts in the field of happiness. I'm not an expert. But one of them is gratitude. If you're on a ski lift, you are easily in the 1% of the world's most wealthy people of the world. Now, I'm not saying that, the county or whatever, but that if you can be in that position, in that place, in that time, that things are going pretty well for you.
That's a cause for being grateful.
It's being grateful. And I do this thing every day. It's on my phone, and my phone goes off at 12:34 every day. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 12:34 and I say 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's 5 things I'm grateful for. And they can be the smallest things in the world, and they can be something massive. And, there's embrace equanimity. Great things happen to you. Bad things happen to you. And how you deal with the peaks and valleys is overall sort of how you can deal with life, what life throws at you. But by being more grateful, I think that it's stopping and kind of being present in the fact that, like, something simple, like I get to talk about something I enjoy about. There's one right there today.
We're doing it right now.
We're doing it right now. It's spring outside, and it's actually getting nice and enjoyable, even though it's mud season. Spring skiing's been fun. There's 3. People are going to go to my website. I'm going to make millions of dollars now because of this podcast,
and pay a commission to ThinkRadio too, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We should talk about that before the podcast started.
Yeah.
And 5, I'm going on a road trip to see some old friends, and so I think we can all look for just tools to be more present and grateful for what we have, even the smallest things.
Well, you made it look effortless. It kind of is, though, if you really put your mind to it. Anthony, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Me too.
And look forward to seeing you out there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Al.
All right.
Think Radio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison, Colorado's locally owned hometown newspaper, and by the Western State Colorado University Master of Environmental Management Forum, working to connect students, the community, and the environment.
Think Radio is a production of Alan Wardis Media. The show's executive producer is Issa Forrest. Associate producer, Kat Seibert. Original music by Issa Forrest. New episodes are available for download every Monday morning on iTunes and at alanwardismedia.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Think Radio.